sheet, you have to be prepared for every option. It's not like the open team sheet, the best of 3 you can adjust. So he's got the experience. Let's see if he can make it work now. It's time to get into game 1 here of our round 2 right away. That is a slow start coming out from Dave, Tinglu, and Dondozo.
Yeah, and we're going to see the Amoonguss on Markus' side of the field with that Urshifu. So big attacking presence there. Going to threaten the Tinglu if it doesn't go for the Terastallization. But more importantly, the Amoonguss here going to be able to disrupt things on Dave's side of the field with that Spore. And it has got access to that redirection, can protect the Urshifu. It does feel threatened this next turn. But I think that both the Dondozo and that Tinglu need to be careful around that Spore coming out potentially here. But we're just seeing a protect.
Yeah, this was the opportunity where maybe on that first turn you could see a Terastallization and make sure you're not going to be spored, especially since the Dondozo is the Grass Terra, but no Protect, and that's going to be the Amoonguss instead. Big hit into the Tinglu to start chipping away some damage. Little chip in return with that Rocky Helmet, but Sand Tomb into the protected Amoonguss. Now Dondozo, last to act on this turn, will go for the Yawn, the attempted double up into that slot.
It's a fantastic play here from Markus, really identifying that Dave knows that the Amoonguss is going to be one of those key Pokemon to take down early, protecting it here and getting that free close combat off, making the Tinglu in a position now where it is going to be knocked out if it takes another one this next turn, so can't really be that carefree with it here. Close combat comes out into that slot. It will be at the detriment of Dave in losing one of those really big, pivotal, key defensive tools that he has access to.
Yeah, and that's where things are going to be tricky because you can look at that era, but that's still potentially so much damage. You are going to see that this Urshifu is locked now into close combat since it is the choice Scarf. So you do have at least a little bit of predictability into this case. And the Amoonguss, surely not going to go protect this time. So this could be safe to just try and double into it again. Yeah,
and we are going to see a Terastallization come out from this turn too, and it will be onto Dave's side of the field. It will be the Tinglu, potentially going for that Poison Terra type to take less damage from a close combat that could be fired out from that Urshifu. Of course, we know it is a choice Scarf, so it will be locked into that move here as the close combat comes out into the Dondozo here, doing some respectable damage, just taking it down about just above 50% health, but it does leave the Amoonguss open now. No Protect coming out from that side as the Sand Tomb comes out and misses again.
First time it protected, second time the miss. The Amoonguss does not want any part of it. The Yawn, though, of course, will make it drowsy, so we'll be falling asleep next turn, unlike the automatic response and return. Spore into the Dondozo.
The Sand Tomb there was so unfortunate because you get the Yawn off into the Amoonguss, right, and then you trap it onto the field. So really key for Markus here. He is going to be able to switch that Amoonguss out. It does open the door for maybe Dave to try and target into that slot, catch something on the switch in, but if you go for maybe one of those stomping tantrums or something like that, you could get full foul of maybe one of the Tornadus or the Landorus coming in on that slot, especially now the Dondozo is asleep and rendered useless.
First thing to be swapping out, it will be that Urshifu, bringing the Fluttermane into the field. Booster energy for that Photosynthesis. That will be a special attack. So looking to go on to the offensive there. And the double swap out here. You did have a double lowered stats from that close combat. You were yawned on the Amoonguss. And with 2 very passive Pokemons coming out from Dave's end, I don't dislike this whatsoever.
Yeah, and now we do see the Incineroar come onto the field. The body press coming out. Really good switch here from Markus. Not affected by the ghost typing on the Fluttermane. So free switch here for Markus, which is not something that you commonly see. Markus playing this very well, making it difficult for Dave to get any sort of momentum in this game. Already spent that Terastallization as well, and the Dondozo takes another turn of sleep. So it'll be interesting to see. There is fake out here from the Incineroar. Will it go into the Tinglu to prevent it from moving this turn? Probably likely. And that frees up the Fluttermane to get a big attacking option off onto either of these targets that have taken a lot of damage already.
And that's the issue when you're looking at these slower teams where things can go wrong so quickly. Dondozo is going to be taking that second turn of sleep, so an attempt at the Protect not going to happen. And no Protect from this Tinglu means Shadow Ball will hit into it, bringing it down real low, not getting KO'd quite yet, considering that lowered special attack. Parting shot into the Dondozo, and a chance again for Markus to pivot.
Yeah, and a really nice option here, getting that attack drop again onto the Dondozo, making it even less useful from an offensive point of view. Coming in probably is going to be the Amoonguss again, coming back onto the field, going to be able to utilize, but it's not the Amoonguss, it is the Urshifu wanting to go for that offensive damage. The Ruination coming out from this Tinglu, going to be able to do 50% damage to its current health, taking it down just below 50% of its health now. Markus sitting in a very dominant position here. The Dondozo on not great health. The Tinglu going to get knocked out with whatever comes out from Markus' side of the field. So Dave in bit of an awkward position here going into this next turn.
That's 100% it, and considering the speed that Markus has on his team, you have the speed options, but even just with the natural speed of these Pokemon, the Choice Scarf onto that Urshifu, Dave won't even have a chance to really respond before these get KO'd. So we'll see a Terastallization now coming out from Markus at this point, and considering the Pokemon on the team, not surprised necessarily to see an offensive Terra, the Fairy type onto the Flutter Mane. This one is not choice locked. It is that booster energy, so it can be swapping into something like a powerful Dazzling Gleam, or just the Moonblast.
Surging Strike coming out, picking up the knockout onto the Tinglu, so that is one Pokemon down, leaving the Dondozo a sitting duck almost here from that Fluttermane that is just Terastallized, boosting those Fairy type attacks, so going to be able to do some big damage. Is it enough damage to remove this and take Markus one step further to closing this game out? The Moonblast coming out, and it is into the Dondozo.
And that will be a KO. The Vessel of Ruin removed, so the Dondozo will be taking full force of the damage and double KO on this turn. Now we get to see the back Qianpao Dragonite. This is definitely a very aggressive core.
Yeah, really strong pairing here for Dave as it comes out onto the field. And something, if you are going down in resources, you want to bring these two onto the field together with that sort of rune ability. Of course, next to the Dragonite, it is holding that Assault Vest item, so it is going to be able to take those attacks a little bit better from the Fluttermane than we would used to be able to see. But the Terastallization's been eaten up here by that Tinglu. Dragonite not going to be able to go for that and is going to be susceptible to those Fairy type attacks.
And even looking at something like Qianpao, I mean, you have the Choice Scarf onto the Urshifu, it's locked, but you're still going to be taking so much damage. And I think that even though this core of two Pokemon can be doing a lot, it's still a big ask going into this. Protect on the Fluttermane to be kicking things off, and Surging Strikes into the Qianpao. Of course, you get the 3 hits, so the Focus Sash won't matter. I don't think it's going to be enough quite for the KO, but it can be picked off next time around.
Yeah, it's a big turn here, and showing the utility of that Choice Scarf once again. The Sacred Sword coming out, picking up the knockout onto the Urshifu, but it's got a lot of value out of that turn for Markus. Fluttermane obviously going to go unharmed here with that Protect, being such a good utility that we don't generally see on it. Stomp and Tantrum, the option that Dave goes well with the Dragonite into that slot. But it's such an easy switch now for Markus just to bring the Incineroar in, drop an Intimidate, and have access to that Fake Out, in particular into the Qianpao. Not going to be effective into that Dragonite with that Inner Focus.
And with the Qianpao too, when you're looking at what you can maybe do if you're trying to get out, if you don't maybe think that there's going to be the Fake Out, even something like the Sucker Punch is not really going to be dealing much to the Fluttermane after the Intimidate and whatnot. So Protect on this turn definitely makes sense. See what damage you could be dealing with the Dragonite. Rock can do extreme speed. It's not going to be doing quite as much damage as a Choice Band variant would.
No, and we are going to see the Fake Out into that Qianpao. It is not going to be affected this turn. The protecting it here for at least one more turn. The Extreme Speed coming out, but like you say, not as powerful as that Choice Band variant. The Fluttermane taking it, returning with a Moonblast.
This into the Assault Vest Dragonite, regardless, going to be more than enough for that one-hit KO. Aim down to final Pokemon, Qianpao on just a sliver of health.
Yeah, and now you're looking down at a full health Incineroar. I mean, if that was the only Pokemon Markus has got, he's in a really good position, but also got the Fluttermane there. The Icicle Crash going to come out into the Incineroar, fishing for that flinch, but yeah, can't ignore the Fluttermane. It is going to come out with the Moonblast and pick up a knockout, taking game 1 for Markus Stadter as we are getting into round 2, and things are really heating up, Sierra.
Such a fun match. I think, too, that there's a lot of different ways that things could have gone for that match, which I think will be really, really fun for this game, too, here. We got to see from Markus's end really well playing around that options over on Dave's end that we're trying to slow things down. You Sport into that Dondozo, so it can't essentially yawn lock you. Of course, that Sand-Tomb miss was unfortunate. That does have to be called out as well, because that would have been a trapped Amoonguss on the field, as well the Terastallization. It was on a Tinglu that, well, then the Urshifu ignored it for that turn. If it was on something like that Dondozo into that grass, well, then you wouldn't have been Spored. So I feel like there's a lot of kind of rough 50-50s in here to where there's 2 paths we really could have gone down. And with that information now, we'll be really intrigued to see how they go into this game too.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, that Sand-Tomb was really pivotal there. The first time going into the Protect there, so really good Protect from Markus turn 1, catching out Dave so heavily here with that close combat, which was almost for free, putting the Tinglu in a position where it almost has to Terastallize to survive that next turn, and then the Sand-Tomb miss and following on from that. And the utility of that Urshifu with that Surging Strikes, with the Choice Scarf item was so good in this game. Getting the Tinglu, getting the Qianpao later on, not picking up the knockout, but getting it down to a point where it was easily dealt with after that.
Yeah, and it's rough. I think actually Markus had a really nice lead into things, because when you have the Urshifu going next to, I love that zoom in, by the way. That's awesome. But when you have the Amoonguss and the Urshifu, you can't necessarily protect over on Dave's end to see what Markus is trying to do, see what he's going for, because then you're just going to be taking unnecessary damage from that Urshifu with that Unseen Fist ability. So great lead coming out. Of course, having that information, you could try and lead something a little bit more aggressive on your own end to kind of pressure back.
Yeah, I think if you're going down a different route, I think maybe the Dragonite would even be a good option from Dave going into Game 2 to potentially look at least where it does pressure things like the Amoonguss and the Urshifu pretty well with that aerial ace in particular. You haven't got the choice band we've already mentioned, but of course you can do some big damage, and then if you're pairing that up with the Chen Pao, almost you feel like Dave would have been in a better position if he'd kind of swapped his Pokemon round and led with what he kind of ended the game with. But we'll see what comes out here as Markus leads off with the Incineroar and the Amoonguss.
There's definitely an adjustment going into this game too, but not coming out from Dave, instead from Markus. Urshifu either left at home or in the back. It'll be Incineroar to start things off with the Amoonguss. So a round of Intimidate, but that's about it. You do have the fake out pressure on this turn, but we could even just see a quick double protect.
Yeah, and I think that's what's coming out from Dave. Just wants to kind of get around this fake out, which is going to stop him from potentially going for a Sand Tomb, which is exactly what I think he wants to probably do onto that Amoonguss. Trap it on the field, get the Yawn off, and really sort of nullify it. So it's not an offensive threat. It's just a wasted Pokemon on the field for Markus, and that really limits what Markus then is able to do. But can Markus see through that? Maybe try and switch the Incineroar out here, as we do see the double protect coming out from the Tinglu and the Dondozo this turn.
Yeah, no swap coming out, so the Incineroar sticking around for this turn. Amoonguss as well. The attempt to fake out here, attempted into that Tinglu slot. So I feel like Dave at a really nice spot here. You have kind of all the information going into this as well, and you haven't used your Terra, and I don't really think you're pressured in this Tinglu to have to waste the Terra over on that end either.
No, and like you mentioned, in the downtime between games 1 and 2 here, I think the Dondozo would be a good option to Terrasilize here. Of course, in front of an Incineroar, it does make it difficult because you do come susceptible to those fire-type attacks if you go for the grass, but it could be enough to give you the room where you are able to avoid a Spore for one turn, and that would then allow you to get that Yawn off, potentially the Sand Tomb as well, and you can still pressure with the Wave Crash as well into the next turn if you do go for that grass terrestrialization, but it does give you a bit more room and an option if you are Dave. Not seeing that though. Parting shot coming out from the Incineroar, just wanting to get off the field.
Yeah, and now you're not going to be pressured by a potential Flare Blitz on the next turn, so you are going to get a round of lowered attack, special attack on this time around. And now Markus could pivot into something that could maybe deal with a little bit more offensive pressure going on to this next turn. That will be that Urshifu. So Terra not spent, you have that going on forward, but Sand Tomb, another miss into this Amoonguss. You get the Yawn, but it just has free capability of swapping out next turn again.
One of the drawbacks of the Sand Tomb, it's a great move when it does hit, but it is really costly when it misses. And again, the Dondozo falling susceptible to that Spore. It does get the Yawn off, but it's an easy switch now for the Amoonguss to go out, get rid of that Yawn. It's not going to fall asleep, get something else, and we know the Incineroar's in the back. We know as well that the Tinglu doesn't have Stomp and Tantrum. It can go for a Body Press, of course, but then if it goes for that, it is going to be susceptible to a move from the Urshifu on the other side of the field. What does Markus decide to go for? Does he go for the Surge and Strike here into that slot? Because, well, if it does terrestrialize, then you're still doing very good damage with it, of course.
And when you're not being able to lock this Amoonguss in, and you're just getting spored for it in return, you just fall so far behind, because now your Dondozo is asleep. The Amoonguss, of course, who could have seen this one coming, going to be swapping out, bringing the Incineroar back in. It's a move we would see all the time anyways without that threat of Yawn. So another round of Intimidate for the road. Close combat, unterracialized Tinglu, a lot of damage with that super effective hit.
Yeah, and Markus not opting for the Surge and Strike here, just wanting the pure damage into that Tinglu here, and a really useful damage as well. The Sand Tomb coming out though, it does connect, trapping in that Urshifu. It has taken those defense drops from using the close combat, of course, so it will be taking more damage going forward, but it is all down to that Dondozo to wake up. Of course, it does spend a turn sleeping there, the residual damage coming out, and now the Incineroar back on the field has access to that fake out for this next turn.
And even when you're looking at the Urshifu, sure, you're locked onto the board, so yeah, your defense, your special defense is going to keep getting lower turn after turn, but when the Dondozo is asleep and another hit into this Tinglu can be finishing it off, I don't necessarily think it's the worst case scenario at this point. If something were to wake up, it'd be a little bit of a different story. But sure enough, fired off into the Tinglu. That's going to be taking the first KO of the match.
Yeah, and that's a big knockout here. Dave not wanting to commit to the terrestrialization on the Tinglu like in game 1, so allowing it to go down. The Sand Tomb obviously being able to trap it in, but the effects may be wearing off after the Tinglu goes down. The knockoff coming out from the Incineroar going to be able to be a vital knockoff because it takes away some recovery from the Dondozo with that Citrus Berry and the Yawn fired out into the Incineroar, but probably not the Pokemon you want to be going for the Yawn into. So known for just pivoting in and out of the field so much, so easy switch out again for Markus this next turn.
At least where things could be interesting, bringing a Gouging Fire this time around. Xianpao left at home. Now you have the option of maybe trying to put some pressure off, and this is going to be booster energy into the speed. So how about the potential of the Dragonite swap in? If you are then forcing that Incineroar to be swapping out because of the Yawn, you could be taking advantage of a little bit more of a passive turn coming out from Markus.
Yeah, and you're not really locked into a move that you preferably want to be in with the Urshifu as well, because that close combat is lowering your stats the whole time. And like you say, if we do see the combination with the Howl, the Dondozo switch out, it is now Euic, of course, and the Dragonite come onto the field, taking that Howl. With that inner focus, you know, essentially it's going to be very difficult for Markus to get through these two threats that are now out on the field. I think the adjustment to the Gouging Fire makes it difficult for the Fluttermane, if that is the remaining Pokemon on Markus' side of the field, to come in and be as effective as it was in that game 1.
Howl will be the first. That's going to be +1 attack to both the Dragonite and that Gouging Fire in close combat into the Dragonite slot. Of course, not going to be too effective. And now this is the third round of slower defense and special defense onto that Urshifu. Parting shot into the Gouging Fire. That's just going to be bringing that attack back to neutral at this point. Well, Markus can have a Pokemon come in, whether it is that Amoonguss or whether it is that fourth final Pokemon.
Yeah, the Amoonguss could come in here. Nice switch as well, because it does give you the ability to redirect if you want to this next turn to protect that Urshifu even more well. You could get maybe the Incineroar back onto the field, reset those stat drops, or you could just commit to the close combat again just to chip away at both these Pokemon on Dave's side of the field, because I think that the primarily you're going to have to start doing at some point is just whittling down these big threats now, especially if Howl is one of those options that Dave's going to rely on going forward to boost and further boost the attack power on it and the Dragonite.
Well, this is going to be the point in the match that we're going to see terrestrialization coming out. And it's going to be that Amoonguss. That is into the water type here, making sure that it's not going to be taking a super effective hit from something like an Aerial Ace or a Heat Crash. Yeah,
really good terrestrialization here, and does put it in a position where it can go for the Spore into that Gouging Fire. The question is, can it take an attack from this Dragonite? The Urshifu going down to that breaking swipe here, and the attack drop not really going to affect the Amoonguss too much. A Dragon Claw coming out, but the Amoonguss hanging on just barely, activating that Citrus Berry, going to get a bit of health back in return, and then open now to going for a Spore.
Sure, you had that +1 to your attack, but having that Assault Vest, wanting that longevity into this match, going to be costing you. The Amoonguss holding on and getting to recover a little bit now. Fluttermane coming out. And it's tough because you want to kind of keep the Dragonite around to heal up, but it's also heavily threatened by the Fluttermane. You also just need to pivot at some point to reset, to make sure that, hey, this Fluttermane's not going to be taken out. So
yeah, and I think it's a really nice position now that Markus is in, especially putting that Dragonite to sleep, because you've almost rendered it useless, right? Where it can't attack this next turn, where you can get a Dazzling Gleam off if you decide to. It's going to be neutral damage into the Gouging Fire as well. Obviously not resisted. The partial Dragon typing there makes it a bit more vulnerable to that move. So Markus in a position where he's quite safe to potentially just take full advantage of the Fluttermane, take advantage of the redirection support from the Amoonguss here, and make it difficult for David to kind of get any sort of momentum swing here. But like you mentioned, getting that Regenerator activated is key here, and dropping another Intimidate onto that Gouging Fire going to be very important as the Incineroar hits the field.
Especially, too, maybe the Dragonite's not going to be threatening the Fluttermane too much, but a Heat Crash definitely could be doing some damage into that slot. Protect that time around, though, just to keep it safe, though. Now it's already burnt that Dazzling Gleam. That'll be trying to hit into both targets, nothing into the Gouging Fire, but into the Dragonite. Super effective, even with the Assault Vest, is going to be doing so much damage.
Yeah, and this is another turn where the Dragonite has the opportunity to potentially wake up and get an extreme speed off into the Fluttermane. We saw what the extreme damage was like pre-Howl the last turn. The Fake Out coming out into the Gouging Fire. The Dragonite stays asleep, though, as the Fluttermane going to be able to get an attack off.
Yeah, that's the flinch. That's going to be the sleep, the dazzling gleam. Dragonite taken out. No attempt at trying to speed into something like that Incineroar. That's just a tough spot. Now, it'll be the Dondozo to come back out onto the match. Just the final 2 Pokemon. I mean, these are definitely Pokemon that could be doing a bit more, but when the Dondozo doesn't have the Citrus Berry, you're not having the Tinglu to stop the amount of damage coming up from the Flutter Mane, and you do have that booster special attack boost on that Flutter Mane. It's definitely a tough situation.
Yeah, of course as well, and I think the Amoonguss as well with that water terrestrialization in the back, probably such a preferable Pokemon to bring in against the Gouging Fire and the Dondozo, especially when you're cycling in the Intimidate from the Incineroar to lower the attack on the Gouging Fire, keep it in check so you're not really threatened by some of those more neutral damaging attacks. You've got the ability to bring it in, put things to sleep again, and really disrupt with the Flutter Mane when the time is right. So you're not taking too much damage from your main attacker, but using your pivot tools, your defensive tools to come in and really disrupt the remaining 2 Pokemon on Dave's side of the field.
Howl from Gouging Fire to try and make sure these last 2 Pokemon are set up for the best success that they have going on here, where Incineroar with the parting shot, instantly lowering it back down, coming out from the Dondozo. And I think this is the game that we're going to be seeing coming out from Markus. Make sure that the Gouging Fire can't let these 2 Pokemon get set up. And now you have the Amoonguss, you have that pressure. So, I mean, when you're Dave, you need to start trying to get rid of that damage of the Flutter Mane. But a yawn into this as well to force that to sleep is also nice.
Yeah, the yawn there is a nice one, but it's so easy for Markus now just to switch out that Flutter Mane into the Incineroar, drop another Intimidate, and then go for potentially another Spore with the Amoonguss into either the Dondozo or that Gouging Fire to potentially render them useless for at least 1 turn before they're able to wake up again. And I think that room that Markus is able to do with that particular Pokemon just going to allow him to close this match down very slowly with the Flutter Mane. But I think Dave, if anything, needs to really pressure while he can with that yawn to make it difficult for Markus to keep things out on the field.
You need to keep that pressure up, but it's tough because the Pokemon that Markus has left, they are pivoting Pokemon. You want to be pivoting this Incineroar in and out. And when the Incineroar pivots in and out, the Howls just keep getting negated. Of course, bringing the Incineroar in, you now get into Howl after, and depending on where the yawn goes, it could be the Amoonguss then that is forced to be swapping out. So you'd have to be, you're making sure that the Incineroar kind of sticks around. But Spore now into the Gouging Fire, that is going to disrupt the plan.
Yeah, very disruptive, of course. Now you've got the ability to switch out the Amoonguss, of course, here. You don't want to go into sleep, so it's obviously the Flutter Mane's going to come in on that slot. But the thing that you have nice next to it is the Fake Out from the Incineroar. That's an easy target into the Dondozo here. Get that Flutter Mane back onto the field, and then you're in that same position the next turn where you can maybe go for another parting shot into the Gouging Fire, and then you've got the Intimidate to cycle in. You've got a nice safe switch from the Flutter Mane into the Amoonguss, which is now in the back. Got that Regenerator activated once again. It's full health going forward in the match. And it's going to make it very difficult for Dave to kind of get a foothold here if Markus continually is able to do this rotational cycle with the Incineroar, the Amoonguss in particular.
The thing is you have to catch a awkward position for Markus here or hope that a mistake is made. So hoping maybe a Fake Out's not going into the Dondozo on that turn, so you get that heavy slam on that Flutter Mane swap in. But of course, the Fake Out hitting into that slot, nothing is going to be free at that point. So Markus doing really, really well to make sure that with the couple of steps ahead that you are, it's not going to be finding any momentum. Another turn of sleep, and Moonblast does so much damage. Parting shot now into the Dondozo.
Yeah, parting shot into that Dondozo. Going to take its attack stat down to neutral. Again, the Gouging Fire just surviving that Moonblast, as we are going to see the Amoonguss enter the field once again. But what is the Dondozo doing? Is it locking in that heavy slam into the Flutter Mane? And is that parting shot going to be enough to allow the Flutter Mane to survive? Oh, it's not. It picks up a huge knockout here. Markus losing one of the key aspects of his team to be able to get the damage onto Dave's side of the field. A massive play, Sierra.
100%. That's going to be evening the Pokemon count 2-2 now. Incineroar and Amoonguss. The Dondozo has taken, the Gouging Fire has taken so much damage at this point. The Dondozo has not. You do still have that Terra, though obviously going into that Terra means that Incineroar can be doing a lot more damage into you. Wake Up as well on this turn, the Gouging Fire. It will be protecting past this one. Make sure that you're not going to be faked out. Yeah,
that's a huge turn there. Huge Wake Up as well, because it allows you now to go for that Howl and start boosting up the attack on that Dondozo and the Gouging Fire. Like you say, the damage done to the Gouging Fire, it's probably going to go down to either a Sludge Bomb or even maybe Will it go down to a Flare Blitz? Probably not from the Incineroar, maybe, but you never know. Probably a knockoff will be enough to get that, but then the Dondozo is kind of free to have to deal with the Amoonguss. I think that's the big problem here. Can the Dondozo deal with the Amoonguss? And I don't think so because of the Spore there. The Amoonguss has got access to that Sludge Bomb, which will be able to chip down slowly the Dondozo as we go forward.
It's definitely going to be a slow, grindy game here at this point. Breaking Swipe, lower the attack onto the Incineroar. Knockoff, that'll be enough for the KO at that point. Already brought down so low from that Flutter Mane. So now it's the solo Dozo all alone on the field. Yawn into the Amoonguss. No more pivoting capability on Markus's end, so they are the final two. So the Drowsiness is going to be sticking. Sludge Bomb to just start dealing a little bit of chip.
Yeah, and I think Markus not really taking priority of putting it to sleep here, just going for the damage, because I think another knockoff Sludge Bomb combination can be enough. And we do see Dave lock in the forfeit. Markus going to take round 2 here as our winner at the EUIC Championships.
I know it was only a 2-game set, but it was starting to feel like a 3-game with how long that second game went.